I think it's important for us every day to find rhythms of rest that we give ourselves the permission to lay at his feet the burdens, the trials, the troubles, the anxieties we've been carrying. We need to truly believe that God alone is our sustainer and our restorer in every way that we can imagine. I'm Curtis Zackery. I'm a teaching pastor at Church of the City in Franklin, Tennessee. I'm also an author and founder of an organization called Finding Rest. A few years ago, my wife and I were living in the Bay Area of California, and we were serving in a small church plant. We recognized very quickly in moving there that the type of work that we were doing was really beautiful and purposeful work. We were walking alongside homeless friends who were looking for a place to live. We were walking alongside people who were dealing with addiction, having a chance to open the word with folks. It was really a beautiful time. The only problem was I was starting to recognize that in all of the work that we were doing, I was starting to feel this exhaustion rising. And it wasn't this surface level of exhaustion that would be remedied with a little time off or a vacation. It was a lot deeper. During that same season of time, my wife and I experienced loss through miscarriage twice, and it was devastating. We had never experienced anything like this, and the grief and the pain accentuated some of these other tensions we were experiencing. I think the last piece was we felt alone in our journey, and those three things converging led to the realization that something needed to change. One of the greatest revelations in the midst of that season was realizing that I was doing a lot of good work for God, but I'm not really sure a lot of that work was done with God. Now, I know that we all have this understanding that our lives are lived out on earth for God. We're called to spend our lives for Him. He's given us good works, and we want to live out our lives in a way that honors God. The problem is, a lot of people, just like myself, try to do that sustained in our own strength. I was recognizing that even though I had a calling and something God was leading me toward, I was trying to do it my own willpower, and it just wasn't sustainable. I remember reading a quote from a man named Soren Kierkegaard, and he said, "It is absolutely unethical when one becomes so busy communicating that he forgets to be what he teaches." And I needed to ask the really hard question: God, are you really enough for me? That's what set me on the journey to try to figure out what it meant to be sustained by Him alone. And I think that introspection, that opening up to God, the reality of where I was and the trust that He could show me by His Word and by His Spirit, what it meant to be with Him and for that to be enough, that's what changed the rest of my life. So I just released a new book. It's called Finding Soul Rest, 40 Days of Connecting with Christ. And the purpose of this work is simply for us to get the permission and the space to allow God to do the work that only He can do. It's in 40 sections that are about 2 or 3 pages, and each one is really meant to get us to fix our eyes on an idea that will hopefully invite the rest that can only come from God. There's some questions to consider, and it will give us some space to be able to process what it is that we need from God so that we will live for His glory here on earth. So if there is one phrase that I would say summarizes my life's calling here on earth, it's to help people to find rest in God. Now, I know that might seem pretty general in nature when it's stated, but I feel like this is the message that is woven throughout the narrative of the whole Bible. From Genesis to Revelation, I think God is continually inviting humanity to come to a place of deep, soulish contentment connected to Him. And we, the humanity that God created, even find ourselves longing for fulfillment and maybe even rest in things that are not God. And so I truly believe that the rest God desires for us to find is in Him alone. And we find that rest now in the finished work of the cross. We understand that our identity, our worth, our value are not found in the things that we do, but it's whose we are. It's understanding that the true work that needed to be done is already finished. And all the work that we will do in our lives comes from rest, from the finished work of Christ. I think it's really important for us to be intentional to make space so that God can populate that space with what it is that He desires for us. I think sometimes we can rush to try to add things into our lives that we think will help us to grow in our spirituality, help us to advance in our understanding of the things of God. But before we do that, I think it's important that we preserve space. And for me, it's at the very beginning of the day to ask one simple question. What is it that you want me to see or understand about you today, my Father? That direction looks different on different days. Sometimes it's a very clear picture of what the next right steps are. Sometimes a sense in my heart what He wants me to understand. Maybe He'll bring to mind a scripture and I'll go to that and I'll meditate on that scripture. But I think it's important that I don't rush to my own ability to resolve my problems, but I simply make space for God to do what He wants to do in my life. Here's an excerpt from Jesus Calling, January 16th, that I hope will encourage you today. Come to me and rest in my loving presence. You know that this day will bring difficulties, and you're trying to think your way through those trials. As you anticipate what is ahead of you, you forget that I'm with you, now and always. Rehearsing your troubles results in experiencing them many times, whereas you are meant to go through them only when they actually occur. Do not multiply your suffering in this way. Instead, come to me and relax in my peace. I will strengthen you and prepare you for this day, transforming your fear into confident trust. And there's this invitation that Jesus offers to those who are the rule followers and the rule setters, the people who are exhausted, spending their lives doing for God in their own strength, and those who have been wrought with mystery of trying to figure out how to live godly lives. And in the midst of all of that, He says, come to me, all who are weary, and I will give you rest for your souls.